pericardium, but you also may have noticed that there's this big, huge vein running up the central portion of the ventral side, and that's called the ventral abdominal vein. Right, so the heart itself has 3 chambers, and because it only has 3 chambers, that means there's oxygenated and deoxygenated blood that's mixing in the ventricle. So if we lift up the heart, you'll see that under the heart there's this big blue sinus or big blue vein that all the blood collects in, just like in the shark. Do you guys remember what that's called? Sinus venosus, okay? So from the sinus venosus, blood then travels into this first chamber here, the right atrium, and then it goes into the ventricle, and from the ventricle, it's pumped out into the system, okay? And that's kind of inefficient because that's straight up deoxygenated blood. Okay, so the blood from the system will return to the heart from the lungs and the skin where it's oxygenated, and it will go into the left atrium, and then it will flow back into the ventricle. So that newly oxygenated blood is now mixing with the deoxygenated blood in the ventricle. And if you're curious, you can cut up through the heart, but you'll notice that there's no separation between the ventricle sides. So there's a lot of mixing of blood. So to make it really efficient, after blood is pumped from the ventricle for the second time, it's pumped out to the rest of the body through this big vessel. Okay, and there are 2 of them. There's one right here, and then there's one that goes off to the right side. These are called the aortic arches. Okay, there's one right here and one right here. And the aortic arches have 3 main branches. Okay, and if I stretch the heart this way, you can kind of see that there's one branch here. Sorry, Savannah. Caught here. Is it all right, Rebecca? Okay, there's one branch here. There is another branch in the middle. Okay. Okay, and then there's a branch that's posterior. Caught. All right, so there's this posterior branch here. Okay. Now, the uppermost branch, this is called the carotid arch. Okay. And the carotid arch has 2 branches, and one of the branches has this big bulb on it. See the bulb, that round bulb right there? Okay. That's called the carotid body. And the carotid body is in charge of measuring oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood. It also measures pressure in the carotid artery. The second branch is a singular branch, and that's called the systemic arch. Okay, systemic arch, systemic arch, systemic arch. Okay, so that is going to the whole body. And then the final branch is called the pulmocutaneous arch. Okay, and the pulmocutaneous arch has 2 branches on it. It has a branch that runs lateral and a branch that runs down posterior. The branch that runs down posterior goes to the lungs, so it's called the pulmonary artery. And then the branch that goes lateral is called the cutaneous artery, and it goes to the skin. This is where the blood is oxygenated. Okay, so you have the aortic arch, which branches into the carotid arch that has on it the carotid body, the systemic arch, and then the pulmocutaneous arch, which branches into the pulmonary artery and the cutaneous artery. Okay? After that, we're going to look for some landmarks. We're going to peel up the liver and look for the gallbladder. The gallbladder will tell us where a few of the arteries and veins are. First of all, the big blue vein that's running along the surface of the liver here is the hepatic portal vein. Now, right along with it, you can see this pink artery right here. This is the hepatic artery. It's going to the liver. Okay? If we follow this intestinal tract here, or digestive tract, we see that there's the stomach here, and there's a pink artery going to the stomach, that's the gastric artery, and a blue vein coming from the stomach, that's the gastric vein. Okay. Now if we move further posterior, we remember here that we have the jejunal-ileum, and the jejunal-ileum is joined together by this big mesentery, the mesentery proper. And if we look in the mesentery proper, you'll see that there are tons of arteries and veins. Okay? The pink are the intestinal arteries, and the blue are the intestinal veins. Okay? Then, if we find the spleen, okay, it's not so easy to see here, but if you find the spleen, you can see that there is a blue vein coming directly from the spleen. That's the splenic vein. And then there should be an artery right alongside of it. It's not so easy to see, but I can see a portion of it right here. That's the splenic artery.
Where's the spleen?
This little bead thing right here. Can you see that? Sorry, the flap's in the way. Can you see it right here? Okay, so the blue vein coming from it is the splenic vein, and then this little pink artery that's going directly to the spleen is the splenic artery. Okay, and then if we peel everything over to one side, it's hard to see on this guy, but there's this centralized big vein. You can see it right here as it's going into the liver, but it runs the length, I'm going to peel this mesentery away, so it runs the length of the body in back. This vein brings all the blood up to the hepatic portal vein. Okay, all right, thank you. And up to the sinus venosus. This is the post cava, the inferior vena cava, or the posterior vena cava, whatever you call it, okay? And then all the blue vessels that are joining into the post cava from the lateral sides, those are your renal veins. They're coming from the kidneys. Okay, so see right here, guys over here, here's the post cava, and then all of these blue tributaries coming from the lateral edges are the renal veins. Okay, so you have your ventral abdominal vein, you have your post cava and renal veins, you have your intestinal arteries and veins, you have your splenic artery and vein, you have your gastric artery and vein, hepatic artery and